Hey now! What is up, everybody? My name is Mike Brown, aka Review King MB, and Smallville Rewind. This episode was a pleasant surprise. It's entitled Duplicity, and it was directed by Steve Miner, which I don't usually ever talk about the directors or writers. I probably should more. But this one I happened to I watched the Talkville episode before recording my own episode. So I don't usually do that. I usually watch it after the fact, but man, I didn't realize that Steve Miner directed this because he is a long, probably known horror director, directed films like Halloween H2O, Friday the 13th Part 2, Lake Placid. I mean, the list goes on and on for the horror films that he's known for. So the fact that he directed a Smallville episode of all episodes, and this one in particular, was interesting. At the very beginning, we meet Dr. Hamilton, which it's been a while since we've seen him. It was nice to see Joe Morton back as his character, and especially because Joe Morton is one of the strongest actors that has been on the show, especially as a guest star. And you see he shows up to Luther Mansion and he's talking to Lex and he's very jittery. His hands are shaking, like he can't control himself. I'm like, what happened to this dude? Last time we saw him, he was not like this at all, not even a hint. And Lex talks about how he's heard that things have been going very wrong with his experiments and other people that have told him things that Hamilton has been doing, and Hamilton's trying to downplay it. And Lex says, look, you know what? I'm just going to cut ties. I'm going to end the funding, and you need to get help. Like, you clearly need to see a doctor. I'll pay for it. And Dr. Hamilton's like, nope, I don't want to hear it. Basically, fuck off. He leaves, and he's driving. Now, I'm watching his hands jitter, and I'm thinking to myself, how the fuck is he driving? Why is he driving? This is super ultra mega dangerous, this dude driving. And you even see he's trying to get his pills, which maybe help him control the shaking, I don't know. But as he drops those, an oncoming truck is coming towards him. And they narrowly avoid each other, but the truck drives off the road into the cornfield. And I didn't know if the guy died, the driver, because you just hear the horn going on and on and on. And Joe Morton, Hamilton just says, fuck this shit, and drives off. Hit and run. Or, well, I guess he didn't hit him. But he did cause the accident, and he left him. He left him. And what do you know? Pete Ross, of all people, this late at night is driving down the same road. He notices the truck, leaves his car to go check out the truck. And as Pete's looking at the guy is staring off. At first I'm like, is he dead? No, he's blinking. Okay. And he's staring like shockingly at something. Pete looks over and they both see Clark's spaceship. Oh, fuck. And cut to the intro. And that was a great introduction. Especially because it's like, okay, what's Pete going to do with this information? Cut to the following morning where Pete goes to Clark. Actually, you see Clark, and Clark is like shooting basketball shots from like 40 feet away. And I know he has the superpowers and the strength and ability to do so, but I'm just thinking to myself, especially after that reporter guy recorded all that footage of Clark from afar using his powers, and like as close as Clark has been to having somebody discover his secret or somebody using the secret over him, I don't know if I'd be so out in the open. I know he lives on the farm. I know it's fairly secluded, but still, I'd be too paranoid. And Pete drives up. In fact, Pete drives up right before Clark is about to make a second shot. So I'm thinking to myself, like, Pete could have seen Clark do that if Clark wasn't more careful. So Pete's telling him that, like, hey, I gotta show you something. And you're not gonna believe me unless you come and see it. And I'm thinking, well, Clark is fucking lucky that Pete hasn't told anybody yet. Right? He hasn't called Chloe. He hasn't called anyone else. He hasn't told anyone else. He went to Clark first because Clark's his best friend, of course. That's not the crazy part. It's just like Clark's lucky. They go to the field, and there's the ship. And Clark's kind of like, he has a face where he's like, oh, fuck. And Pete's like, hey, we gotta take this, bring it to my house, and we need to talk to Chloe. We need to talk to reporters. We're gonna become famous. We just found this spaceship. And Clark is doing a horrible job trying to cover this up of like, we don't even know what that is. How do you know it's a spaceship? It's obviously a fucking spaceship. And I know Clark is trying to deflect, but he's doing a terrible job. Sounding convincing to deflect. And Pete's just like, what the fuck is the deal? How are you not more excited and freaking out like I am? And there's this interaction where Pete's like, we're going to bring this to my house. And Clark's like, no, we should bring this to my house. And Pete's like, no, I have like a cellar or a barn or whatever. Nobody ever checks it. It's safe there. And Clark's like, I really think we should bring it to my house. And I like that Pete, because normally Pete or Chloe or anyone else would just be like, damn, okay, Clark, like, fine, sure, whatever. But Pete stood his ground and said, no, it's coming to my house, goddammit. I found it, and we're going to do what I want. And even Clark's like, fuck. Like, how many more of these do I have in me? So they bring it to Pete's barn, and Clark tries to convince Pete, like, we can't tell anybody about this, because what if it's not a spaceship? And what if we get looked at as the laughingstock of the town, and people make fun of us, they think we're weird, and shockingly that worked on Pete. Pete's like, all right, fine, you're right, we're going to figure this out before we tell anybody. And so Clark goes home, tells his parents. His parents are kind of freaking out, as they should, of like, holy shit, what do we do? I love that Jonathan's like, we gotta go there. We gotta go there and steal this fucking thing. Even Clark's like, what? We can't steal it. And Jonathan looks at him like, of course we can fucking steal it. It's yours! Like, this, it's not stealing, really. And they actually go there. They go to Pete's barn late at night, and it's gone. It's missing. And at first I thought Pete moved it. Although we established that Pete couldn't move it or pick it up by himself, so I don't know why I thought that, but for some reason I did. And so they're kind of like, all right, what do we do? They leave. Pete actually catches them leaving the barn. And so Pete's like, wow. Like, not only did Clark tell his father about this, but they came back and tried to take it. And Pete even goes back to the Kent's house the following morning, and he kind of calls Clark out on his bullshit because he doesn't trust Clark anymore. He doesn't believe him, and Clark's trying to act surprised like he didn't know the ship was gone. And Pete's like, fuck you, basically. I know that you were there. I saw you and all this stuff. And Clark, he does the usual Clark thing of, I can't explain anything, but you have to believe me. I didn't do anything. And Pete's just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with the bullshit. I'm done with the lying. And when I think about it, I guess I don't love the fact that Clark almost felt forced to tell Pete. It wasn't like Clark told Pete on his own. I mean, I guess deep down he wanted to tell Pete. I'm sure he wants to tell Lana and Chloe. Like, sure, he wants to, but he doesn't. And it's not like Clark decides on his own to tell Pete. Pete's kind of giving him no choice by saying, I'm going to go tell this person and tell that person that Clark's a liar and all of this stuff. And it's a great shot of Pete driving away from the Kent house. And you see Clark in the rearview mirror. And then Clark just super speeds in front of the car, holds on to the car, and Pete's like, what the fuck? What an awesome reveal. I remember the first time I saw this and being like, holy fuck. He just told him. He just revealed his powers. He revealed his secret. It's one of those things where, because you know that the premise of the show is Clark keeping his secrets, and because, honestly, Pete, as a character, hasn't really been used all that well, or hasn't really been used in a way where you would think he's the first person that Clark would tell about the secret. You're just figuring it's either going to be Lana or Chloe first. So the fact that it's Pete was a pleasant surprise, and the fact that this sort of solidifies their friendship way better than we have seen before. We get told that they're best friends, but he talks to Pete the least amount of anyone else on the show. So I did like it. I did like the reveal. I did like the fact that Pete found out, but I didn't love the fact that when Clark is trying to talk to Pete about everything, he's trying to get him to understand why he has been lying to him and why he's kept the secret. Look, I get why Pete's upset. I do. I get why he's like, you've been lying to me, and he's thinking back of all these stories of Clark lying, and he's realizing now that there's so many lies. I understand that. Just didn't like how mean Pete was being here. Pete, like, takes off. He almost acts like he's afraid of Clark because Clark can do anything to him, but obviously it's like Clark wouldn't. He hasn't. And then the following day at school, Clark goes up to Pete again to be like, hey, can we talk about this? I need the ship for obvious reasons and blah, blah, blah. And Pete's just like, I'm kind of done with this, right? And then Chloe comes up. And Chloe's like, hey, Pete, I heard. So this is where we find out that Pete actually did tell somebody that he saw the ship before he went to Clark. I guess he told either, I don't know if it was the police or the people at the hospital, but I guess Pete did. Now, I don't know how the cops didn't immediately go back to the field, like overnight, to check out this ship. Like how Clark and Pete got to it first the following day. Pretty wild. I guess maybe they're used to hearing about weird alien spaceship or just meteor stuff and half of it's bullshit. So maybe they didn't believe it. That's why they weren't quick to go out there. I don't know. But so Chloe's asking Pete about the whole spaceship story. And Pete, literally while staring at Clark the entire time, says, you know what, Chloe? I did find a spaceship. And I met an alien as well. And Chloe, thankfully, Chloe's not really 100% believing it. Because Chloe's way too smart for this. She goes, oh yeah? Well, you want to tell me what the alien looked like? And Pete, still staring at Clark, says, well, in fact, he actually looked a lot like Clark Kent here. And so this is the moment where Chloe, given her level of intelligence, would say, wait, what? And noticing the tension between them, going like, what the hell is going on here? Like, is Clark really an alien? You know, like I was waiting for that, but Chloe was more just like, oh, okay. I thought aliens were little green people. Like she's very oblivious during this whole interaction, and this made me pissed at Pete. This made me go like, what the fuck, dude? You're kind of exposing Clark indirectly, and Clark's looking at Pete the whole time like, what the fuck, dude? You know, and I'm just like, man, see, you're only proving Jonathan right, everyone right, or at least Clark's, his doubts of like why he should or shouldn't tell somebody. You're only proving it by acting like a dick right now. Again, I get why Pete's upset. I get that he's been lied to, but this was pissing me off. Now, we need to talk about Dr. Hamilton again, Joe Morton went to the hospital to talk to the guy that was run off the road. When the guy recognizes him, the guy actually tells him that Pete Ross was the one that saved him and may have seen the spaceship as well. And then the guy recognizes that Hamilton's the one that ran him off the road. And so Dr. Hamilton just injects him with more morphine or something. Like he kills the guy, overdoses him. That was wild. And so then Hamilton goes to Pete's house, steals the spaceship. Now, I don't know how he picked up the spaceship or carried the spaceship. They didn't show that. They didn't. But we just saw him with the ship at his own place. And then he goes back there to find the missing key for the ship. And Pete catches him. And in the struggle, Pete reveals that, hey, the person that this ship belongs to can kick your ass, or whatever he says, right? And Hamilton goes, you know who this ship belongs to? Get the fuck over here. Like, he knocks him out, kidnaps him. And so all of that was pretty goddamn wild. Before the kidnapping, though, I should mention that Lionel Luthor has come back to Luthor Mansion. He's blind, and it's a combination of Lex's guilt of seeing him blind And also the fact that Lex just doesn't want Lionel around like this. So that makes for some very awkward moments. I think John Glover is tremendous doing all the blind scenes. But then there's one interaction where Hamilton shows back up there, runs into Lionel in the hallway, and because Lex has fired him, Hamilton's now trying to entice Lionel to maybe pick up the slack, to start funding him, and to help him continue his work. He even brings Lionel to his place, shows him the spaceship. Now, Lionel's blind. It was still pretty wild to see Lionel touching the ship and trying to like feel what it is, because this is the first time we're seeing Lionel Luthor of all people anywhere near this ship or anywhere like closer to the Kent's secret. So that was just sort of tripping me out. But he's not seeing it, so he doesn't know 100% if Hamilton's being honest. That's why Hamilton's looking for the key. And then you see, so Chloe figures out everything that's going on, that Hamilton was connected, that the guy at the hospital died. So Clark immediately goes to Hamilton's place, finds Pete. Now, Pete was about to be either tortured or killed. Hamilton had this shot of meteor rock, but in liquid form. And he actually reveals that the reason why he's shaking, the reason why he's jittery, is because he's had too much exposure to the meteor rocks. So I'm like, okay, well, at least they've explained why he's shaking and why he's so all over the place. He's dying, and he knows that he only has so much time left before he can crack this case or before he can figure it out. Maybe he also thinks he can save himself if he figures it out. I don't know. But he's threatening to inject Pete with the same amount of meteor liquid, but he says, you need to tell me who the ship belongs to. And this is the first time I actually liked Pete in this episode, because Pete was losing me for the earlier part of it. But Pete finally says, you're going to have to inject me with that because I will never tell you anything. And I'm like, well, fucking A, dude. Pete finally, like, covers for Clark, sticks up for Clark, and is not willing to sell him out, and is even willing to die to do so. So I did appreciate that a lot. Clark comes bursting through, and it's interesting that he bursts through, like, breaks down the door. Hamilton sees him and just says, I need to find out what he knows, talking about Pete. And it's like he doesn't even react to the fact that Clark just busted the door down with superpowers and speed. Like, I was, it was like, that's the guy. It's not until Clark punches Hamilton out of the way, tries to get Pete out, but the kryptonite's affecting him, making him weak. That's when Hamilton puts it together and realizes that Clark is the guy, is the alien or whatever. And there's a scuffle. Pete actually pushes Hamilton off of Clark, and Hamilton falls into some chemicals, and he hits his head, and more kryptonite liquid stuff starts to drip onto his head. This reminded me a lot of very random reference, but in the Incredible Hulk movie with Edward Norton, Mr. Blue gets hit in the head, and the Hulk's blood starts to drip onto his head, and his head starts to bubble up. And we had to wait 15 or plus years before we find out like what happened to that character. So this reminded me a lot of this, and I didn't remember what happened to Dr. Hamilton. And so you start to see the liquid go onto his head, and it absorbs into his head. So I'm thinking like, oh shit, he might become something. And then he starts to shake like super jittery, very similar to Tony Todd in the Jitters episode. And then he just dies. He stops moving, and Pete's like, he's dead. So I'm like, well, fuck, man. Joe Morton being killed off like that was very underwhelming and feels like a missed opportunity to keep this actor around. You have this actor, I would do everything I could to keep him around for as long as I can. I know that he now knows the secret, but you can pass it away with like, well, they think he's crazy, so he gets put away or something, right? Like, I don't think you had to kill him right here, right now. But that's just me being selfish and wanting him around. Pete now realizes why Clark didn't tell him. He realizes the dangers of the secret. He realizes like what could happen to people close to Clark that does know the secret. So he apologizes to Clark. Another scene where I'm like, thank you, Pete. Thank you for being a decent friend for once. And it's interesting too to have the Kents, Martha and Jonathan, talk to Pete openly about the secret. Like Pete's really a part of the whole deal now. So that was cool. I really liked the last scene when they're playing basketball and Clark seemingly finally gets to be himself around Pete. Like Pete says, "Hey, don't hold back. Show me what you got." And Clark jumps over Pete to make a basket. Super cool effect. And again, Clark just now has somebody to be himself with. Now, before we end the review, I want to mention the Lana Lang side plot. So Lana Lang is, she gets caught almost in a lie from Aunt Nell. I feel like we haven't seen Aunt Nell in quite a while. And apparently Lana told Aunt Nell that she was studying with Chloe. Chloe, quick reflexes, was able to go along with the lie. Only to find out that Lana actually lied about this because Aunt Nell is dating this new guy. And he's spending a lot of time at the house. Lana doesn't really want to be there. I'm wondering, like, are they having a lot of sex and they're loud? Is that why Lana doesn't want to be at this house? Because it's gross? Thin walls? And I did like that Chloe said to her that, like, hey, next time you're feeling that way, because Lana said she stayed at the Talon all night. Chloe says, hey, next time that happens, you can basically come over my place. Like, and it felt like a moment where they're actually going to become closer friends. I like that. Then you get a scene later on where Lana is at Clark's loft, his barn. Of course, she just shows up unannounced, doesn't have to call ahead or ask him ahead of time. I do like that, though. Shows how comfortable she is around there. And so she tells Clark this, tells him about, like, I don't want to be at home because of that. Also, she tells him that, like, she officially broke up with Whitney. Like, it's official, and it's a whole deal. And Clark has this reaction. He makes a face of, like, oh, so you actually broke up with Whitney. Like, wow, And it's like, okay, now ask her out. She's officially a free woman. Now, maybe it's too soon, granted. I can understand that. But, like, dude, you've been waiting how many years for this moment? But instead, he's visibly upset over the stuff going on with him and Pete. Lana asks him about this. And Clark says that, like, well, Pete found out something, the truth about something that I didn't tell him before, and he's mad at me about it. And Lana's like, well, what is it? And Clark's like, we can't really talk about it. And she's like, what the fuck? All of this stuff that I've told you and you can't open up to me about it? And Clark's like, well, Lana, this is personal. And I'm like, fucking hell, Clark. Like, that's the worst thing to say to this girl that you like, and to this girl that you're going to make her feel like she's not important enough to you. I'm not saying he should have told her right then and there. I think there's plenty of other times that he should have told her. Here, yes, it would have been awkward, but I do think he should have come up with a better lie, or he should have just lied about whatever it is that Pete's upset about. He could have said it was about this other thing, as opposed to saying, oh, it's personal. Like, I can't talk to you about this, Lana. I'm not close enough with you about this. It felt wrong. I didn't blame Lana for being upset. Once again, this could be a reason, or one of the many reasons why people don't like Lana, because they think, like, oh, she's acting entitled. I'm on her side here. This is another example of, like, I'm on Team Lana here. I thought Clark was being a little rude. Little bit. Anyways, guys, that's the episode. I overall enjoyed it, even though Hamilton should not have died. Let me know in the comments below what you think of not only the episode Duplicity, but what do you think of Pete Ross in general? Finding out Clark's secret. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Later!